Come, wave like a blow of lightning, falls like rain as the dark calls your name.
This is the perspective from the pro-life angle. Sex education is violently assaulting children's innocence. And I want to read some of this. This was back in 2018 of April. The cartoon shows a man wearing nothing but a long trench coat. He is standing in front of two children who stare, horrified, as he opens his coat, exposing himself to them. On the back of his coat is written, Planned Parenthood School-Based Sex Education Program. It's okay. The man is quoted as saying, I'm funded by the government. If a man stopped the two children on the street and asked them if they knew where to buy condoms and lubricant, how to perform anal and oral sex on one another, and showed them graphic illustrations of those same sex acts, he would be rightly arrested and charged with indecency. But the sad irony is that the same man could be invited to your children's school, into the classroom, to do and say the exact same things, and the government would pay him to do it. They would call it facts-based sex education. You might object that they do it with parents' permission, so it's different. Unfortunately, only true some of the time. Often they'll do it without asking parents' permission, or even worse, by refusing to inform the parents when sex education classes are happening, or to allow them to pull their kids from class during those lessons. Certainly, they're hoping that most parents won't look too closely at what they're teaching. So that gives you one perspective. And let's see what's really going on here.
Your stance.
This is dated March 1st, 2019. It's the Natcher Institute, the religious liberty. Conservatives are weaponizing religious liberty to allow institutions to discriminate. Okay, anyway, here it says, Sex and HIV indication background. Beginning in the 1970s, concern over teen pregnancies and later HIV/AIDS galvanized widespread public support for sex education in schools. Most states today have a policy requiring HIV education, usually in conjunction with broader sex education. Meanwhile, as debate over the relative merits of abstinence only until marriage versus more comprehensive approaches has intensified. States have enacted a number of specific content requirements. This brief summarizes state-level sex and HIV education policies, as well as specific content requirements based on a review of state laws. Now, I will put a lot of these links below. I don't want to bore you by reading to you, but what I wanted to do is kind of highlight some of the things that are actually going on. So we have here 24 states in the District of Columbia mandate sex education. 22 states in the District of Columbia mandate both sex education and HIV education. 2 states only mandate sex education. Okay, I'm going to try not to bore you. But here we have kind of the breakdown. 13 states that require that the instruction be medically accurate. 26 states in the District of Columbia require that the information be appropriate for the student's age. And this is out of 27 states, right, that mandated these education programs. So, content requirements when sex education is taught. Let's see. Okay, so here's some of the content requirement. I don't want to go into how many states, but 18 states require that information on contraception is provided. 37 require that information on abstinence be provided. 27 require that abstinence be stressed, and 10 require that abstinence be covered. 18 states require that instruction on the importance of engaging in sexual activity only when marriage be provided. 12 states require discussion of sexual orientation. 9 states require that discussion of sexual orientation be inclusive, and 3 states require only negative information on sexual orientation. Okay, so you get the idea, right? Now here is a graph. I will put the link below. General requirements for sex and HIV education is listed by state. Sex educated mandated, HIV educated mandated, be medically accurate, be age appropriate, be culturally appropriate and unbiased, cannot promote religion, given parental notice or consent or the option to opt out. So I think parents, this is really important information. Some of us, we can't afford to stay home and homeschool our kids, and we cannot afford private schools or Christian private schools. So, what do you do? Okay, so this is information that's really important. This is content requirement list. Okay, all by state, and I will provide the links below. All right, so next. This is dated in 2017. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this, but this is something that's coming up. You'll see later. The Transgender Agenda has hit kindergarten. Kindergarten, guys. From California to Minnesota to the District of Columbia, the Transgender Agenda has infiltrated the classrooms of even the most tender youth. Okay, so if there's a transition ceremony hosted by a kindergarten teacher at California Rockland Academy Gateway to celebrate a gender dysphoric boy donning the attire and appellation of a little girl. This shocked and angered the parents of the pupils. They did not give advance notice of the lesson and learned the events only when their confused children returned home. So here's another article. This is also older because this is when things started getting fired up. Here's the skinny on kids' rights inside public schools teaching transgenderism. So, public schools are sitting ducks for teaching transgender dogma. What rights, if any, do parents and their children retain to reject while remaining in the public school classrooms? State law governs this question. Currently, only a few states grant parents the authority to remove their children from gender identity lessons. So parents explain that while parents hold a constitutional right to make decisions regarding the upbringing and education of their children, that right at best allows parents to remove children entirely from the public school system. It does not, however, allow them to edit the curriculum within the school system. Okay, so while the First Amendment and many states protect religious liberty, courts are unlikely to interpret those guarantees broadly enough to encompass an opt-out right. Excuse me. So for parents who wish to avoid the confusion that will surely result from their young children learning in school a counterfactual lesson that boys might really be or can become girls, the best option is to abandon the public school system. And this is the problem, isn't it? A lot of us cannot do that. But schools cannot force students to affirm anything. So if you get the general principles of the First Amendment, jury precedents makes that much clear. More than 70 years ago in West Virginia, okay, blah, blah, blah. If there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, or high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or act their faith therein. This is what it means for the students. It means the school cannot mandate that other children missex a gender dysphoric student. In other words, A pupil cannot be forced to call a boy a girl or refer to a boy as she or her, nor can a school insist that pupils celebrate a gender reveal or coming out of gender dysphoric classmates through applause or other affirming behavior. Additionally, teachers may not require students to believe the transgender lessons taught in school or to profess such a belief in classroom discussions on examinations. But here, California parents, after that mandate, California parents objected to the new sex education program in the public school systems. Look at that wonderful picture. Fed Up California parents participated in a sex ed sit-out to protest the state's sex education curriculum, calling it pornographic, age inappropriate, highly biased, and medically inaccurate. So the children are taught negotiation skills for consent to sex. They are instructed in their rights to confidential reproductive health services and directed to local Planned Parenthood clinics for abortion, birth control, and STI testing without parental notice. Some children have been prescribed puberty blockers for gender transition. And sadly, parents have been bullied by social workers that they are afraid to speak publicly about it. Under the California Healthy Youth Act, which passed back in, I think, 2011, sex education would be expanded to include topics such as gender and sexual orientation, bullying and abuse, birth control, including emergency contraception. The reason parents and teachers and school board members are protesting is the way the law is being implemented. Children are being instructed at school against the parents' will and behind their back to do things that are medically risky and life-altering. So it educates students in junior high and high school on how to use insertive condoms and dental dams for anal and oral sex. And Frederick warns that schools may introduce the curriculum at any grade. Okay, so here is the National Conference of State Legislators. Okay, so this is state policies on sexual education in schools. I will leave the links below. So all states somehow involved in sex education for public school system. This is as of March 2016. Looks like it was updated on the 21st of 2019. And I read you some of this already, so I'm not going to go into it. But it says, why is sexual education taught in schools? Because of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention indicates that more than 47% of all high school students said they have had sex as of 2011. And so, it's more now. And 15% of high school students have had sex with 4 or more partners during their lifetime, during their long life in high school. Among students who have had sex in the 3 months prior to the survey, 60% reported condom use, 23% reported birth control use during their last encounter. So that's one of the reasons. And this here, so those are high numbers, and we have to admit it, right? So about 3.2 million adolescent females are infected with at least one of the most common STIs. Okay? So 35% of the teens ages 14 through 19 have HPV. Girls age 15 through 19 have the highest rate, you guys, of gonorrhea and the second highest rate of chlamydia of any age group. So these are really high numbers, and it indicates an estimated direct medical cost, all right, for treating young people with sexually transmitted infections was $6.5 billion annually. excluding costs associated with HIV/AIDS. So these are concerning numbers. But we also have to look at what we're teaching our children in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in the schools, and mostly in our homes, and monitor what they're watching on TV and who their friends are. We have to be Christian parents and teach our children the way they should go. The world is getting darker. These children are learning these things, and it is becoming more normal to have sex 4 times, 60% of the school students. Okay, it's normal. Here's a list of bill tracking. Okay, this seems a little old, but I'll show you the list. I'll give you the link. It has every state. All right. Next. Comprehensive sexual health education in schools save lives. Now, this is the other perspective, February 5th, 2019. This is in EdSource. So this is an educational, outlet, news source. So, recent concerns expressed by those opposed to the inclusion of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer plus content in school sexual health curricula are misguided, they say. Okay? This is their reasoning, and it's always good to understand both sides of the story. Having taught sexual health education at a public middle school for 13 years, I understand the parental feelings of nervousness and fear are often coupled with sexual health education in schools. But I have found most apprehensions can be laid to rest when parents feel their concerns are heard and objectively addressed by a teacher who knows and has taught the material. Therefore, I encourage parents, educators, and community members to critically consider the function of the California Health Framework and the importance of comprehensive sexual health education in schools. So it is important to be involved with your teacher and the educators and the community as a parent if you have to have your kid in public schools. It is important to remember that the framework is not a mandate. It merely serves as a guide for school districts regarding the scope and sequence of their health education curriculum, in what grades health education is taught, what topics, and for how long. The curriculum itself varies by district. That's why it's important to be involved parents. Moreover, the framework suggests teaching on sexual behaviors, sexual orientation, biological sex and gender identity at a time and in a manner that it is deemed developmentally and age appropriate, and that's where you need to be involved. You need to be involved in what is age appropriate. If it's got to happen, it's going to happen. So it's decided by each school district, taking into account input from parents, students, health professionals, and the members of the community. Now, you remember in an article I read earlier that a lot of parents are feeling bullied by the social workers. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to be a group together, like in the people that did the sit-in. Okay, so it's a law that went into effect January 2016 that mandates public school students and more recently charter school students receive comprehensive sexual health education instruction that is medically accurate, inclusive, and developmentally appropriate once in middle school and in high school. So it does not talk about the younger age that we read about in kindergarten. Okay, so I would encourage you to read some of these articles that I'm going to post a link to. But there was something here that I found. Let's see. Now here's where she says it saves lives. It levels the information playing field for every student. It links students to resources, Planned Parenthood. Okay? It dispels myths and stereotypes. Well, depending on what viewpoint you have. It affirms everyone's membership in the classroom, right? Well, it's going to happen, guys. We're moving in the dark ages. School and greater community. It creates, what do they need in college now? Safe spaces. I'm sorry, I have to laugh. It is supported by an overwhelming majority, which I will show you in a minute, because there was research. It is validated and recommended by many associations. Right, so it's saying it will save lives, but she didn't quite go into why a life would be saved. Okay, that doesn't quite make sense. This is the research she linked to. This was dated 2007. And I'll put the link. California Parents' Preferences and Beliefs on School-Based Sexuality Education Policy. Methods. We conducted a random digital dial survey of only 1,284 California parents. It was a random survey, digital dial. So how many of you ever answer the phone when you know it's some salesperson? Stratified into 5 sociographic regions. Parents were questioned about sexuality education, policy preferences, importance and reasons for preferences. Cross tabulations and odds ratios were used. Okay, so the results: 89% of the sample reported a preference for comprehensive sexuality education versus 11% for abstinence only. Now, I bring this up because this tells you the view of the home. This gives you an idea of the majority of the perceptions of those who are in the world as believers or non-believers. Only 11% voted for an abstinence-only education. So that's what we're up against in the real world. We can't ignore that fact. This is just to show you how things are changing quickly and how much harder it's going to be for the next generations. I hope you bear with me through this. I feel this is important. I know this is a boring kind of video, and I'm following through. It's trying to be an obedient child. This next one here, it's comprehensive sexual health courses could become school standard, February 2019. This is in the state of Washington. Colorado. As Colorado moves to bar abstinence-only sex education, teenagers take the lead. So this is becoming a social, acceptable norm in our society. Good.